Squadron leader James Harrington scanned the horizon with a mixture of resolve and unease as the first tendrils of dawn crept over the English Channel. It was the summer of 1940, and the skies above southern England were about to become the crucible in which the fate of an island nation, and perhaps the entire free world, would be decided. The Battle of Britain was underway, a desperate struggle between the Royal Air Force, valiantly outnumbered and under relentless pressure, and the formidable Luftwaffe, whose numerical superiority promised swift domination. Harrington's Spitfire cut through the thin morning mist as he prepared to join the fray, well aware that every sortie could be his last. The stakes had never been higher. The relentless drone of German bombers and fighters threatened the very fabric of British resistance, and the prospect of invasion, Operation Sea Lion, loomed like a spectre over the nation. The strategic importance of these aerial confrontations could not be overstated. Britain, an island fortress, stood as the last bastion against Nazi expansion in Western Europe. Should the Luftwaffe succeed in establishing air superiority, the way would be clear for German forces to cross the Channel in overwhelming force. The RAF, stretched thin in both manpower and material, faced the unenviable task of defending vast swathes of airspace with limited resources. Yet, it was not merely a contest of numbers but one of strategy, courage, and the unyielding will to survive. Radar stations dotted along the coast provided crucial early warnings, their blips and sweeps translating into precious minutes for scrambling fighter squadrons. Ground control rooms became nerve centers of information and command, coordinating frantic deployments of Spitfires and Hurricanes to intercept incoming raids. Harrington remembered the briefing that morning, where the tension in the room was palpable. Wing Commander Thompson had addressed the pilots with a mixture of stern pragmatism and quiet encouragement. "The Luftwaffe flies with confidence born of sheer numbers," he had said, voice low but resolute. "But they do not know the spirit of the RAF. Each of you carries more than a machine gun and cannon. You bear the hopes of a nation that will not surrender." The irony of this defiance was not lost on any pilot. Facing squadrons of German fighters, often twice or thrice their own number, they relied not just on skill but on an almost instinctive trust in their aircraft and comrades. The Spitfire, with its sleek design and powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of resistance, a flying fortress of British engineering and ingenuity. The Luftwaffe, for its part, approached the battle with an air of assured superiority. Intelligence briefings back in Berlin painted the RAF as a beleaguered force, a mere annoyance to be swept aside. German commanders anticipated that successive waves of bombers, protected by fighter escorts, would erode British defences and pave the way for a decisive blow. Operation Sea Lion was predicated on this assumption. The Kriegsmarine's inability to challenge British naval dominance meant that air superiority was the indispensable prerequisite for invasion. Thus, the Luftwaffe's strategy was clear: establish control of the skies by destroying RAF airfields, radar stations, and aircraft production facilities. The German pilots, many veterans of the Blitzkrieg campaigns across Europe, were confident that the RAF's resistance was a matter of time, not contest. Yet, beneath the surface of German confidence, there were cracks. Reports from the front lines indicated that the British radar network was more effective than anticipated, and the fighter command's ability to scramble interceptors swiftly was disrupting German formations. The Luftwaffe's vast numbers often became a double-edged sword. Coordinating large formations over hostile territory with limited radio communication was fraught with difficulty. Pilots frequently found themselves isolated or confused amidst the chaos of battle, their numerical advantage diluted by operational inefficiencies. The British, on the other hand, exploited their home advantage to the fullest. Every downed pilot had a chance to return to fight another day, every damaged aircraft could be repaired swiftly, and the determination of the British people bolstered the morale of those in the cockpit. Harrington's squadron took off from RAF Biggin Hill just as the first German bombers appeared on the radar screen. The tension in the cockpit was almost tangible. The roar of Merlin engines was matched only by the pounding of the pilots' hearts. "This is Eagle 1, Harrington's radio crackled. "Bandits at 10 o'clock, 20 miles, altitude 15,000 feet." The scramble was immediate. The British pilots climbed aggressively, weaving to gain advantageous positions. The sun, rising behind them, cast long shadows that momentarily masked their approach. Enemy fighters, primarily Messerschmitt Bf 109s, raced to intercept, their silhouettes sharp against the pale sky. The stage was set for a brutal engagement where split-second decisions would mean survival or death. The early phases of the Battle of Britain were marked by relentless sorties, with RAF pilots often flying multiple missions a day. Fatigue and the ever-present risk of mechanical failure were constant companions. Yet, the camaraderie among the pilots forged a bond stronger than steel. Stories circulated of pilots covering for each other in tight turns, sharing radio calls to warn of unseen dangers, and the quiet bravery displayed when a wingman was hit but remained in formation to protect the others. Harrington recalled a moment from the previous day. "Hold tight, Johnny, I've got your 6, he had said over the radio, moments before a BF-109 broke through their formation. It was these human elements, trust, courage, and relentless determination, that elevated the RAF beyond mere machinery and tactics. The Luftwaffe's initial raids focused on airfields and radar installations, aiming to cripple Britain's early warning and defense capabilities. However, despite heavy bombing and destruction, the RAF adapted quickly. Runways were repaired overnight, radar stations were moved or camouflaged, and pilots learned to anticipate German attack patterns. Meanwhile, British intelligence worked tirelessly to decode German communications, providing commanders with crucial insights into enemy plans. The resilience of the British defense was not only technical but psychological. A nation refusing to bow under the shadow of invasion, its pilots embodying that defiance in every dogfight. As Harrington's formation engaged the enemy over the Kent countryside, the aerial battle intensified. The Luftwaffe's fighters and bombers pressed their attack with ferocity, but the British pilots' combination of skill, tactical innovation, and home field advantage began to show cracks in the German offensive. The noise of machine guns and cannon fire blended with the roar of engines, punctuated by the occasional crackle of radio chatter and the ominous thud of exploding bombs from below. Yet amidst this chaos, the RAF pilots operated with a disciplined precision that belied the desperation of their situation. The Battle of Britain was not merely a contest of arms but a test of wills. The German High Command watched with growing frustration as their plans faltered against a foe they had underestimated. For the British people, each dogfight was a story of survival and hope, a testament to the courage of those who took to the skies against overwhelming odds. Squadron leader Harrington, pushing his Spitfire to its limits, epitomized this indomitable spirit. His eyes fixed on the enemy, his mind sharpened by training and determination, knowing that the outcome of this aerial battle would echo far beyond the clouds. The morning after the fierce engagement over Kent dawned with a fragile calm, but the air was thick with anticipation. Squadron leader James Harrington and his fellow pilots gathered briefly in the mess to catch their breath, exchange terse reports, and steel themselves for the relentless pace ahead. The stark truth was undeniable. The British pilots were outnumbered, often 2 or 3 to 1, yet their morale remained unshaken, a testament to their unwavering resolve and the exceptional quality of their training. The RAF was a smaller force, yes, but what it lacked in quantity, it compensated for in skill, tenacity, and tactical ingenuity. The Spitfire and Hurricane fighters, though fewer in number, were instruments of precision and agility, capable of matching and even outmaneuvering the Luftwaffe's more numerous aircraft. Harrington's squadron, like many others, relied heavily on the rigorous training they had undergone in the months and years preceding the battle. Aeronautical schools emphasized dogfighting techniques, formation flying, and emergency maneuvers. Pilots drilled extensively in simulated combat scenarios that honed their reflexes and tactical thinking. The RAF's approach was not merely to survive but to dominate the skies through superior skill and coordination. The lessons learned in the crucible of earlier conflicts in Europe and Africa had been distilled into a doctrine that prized adaptability and aggression. Fly smart, fly hard. Harrington often reminded his younger wingmen, words that encapsulated the mindset required to face a foe whose numbers could easily overwhelm. The pilot's bravery was palpable, not only in the heat of combat but in the quiet moments between sorties. Harrington, a man of few words, observed the subtle camaraderie that bound his squadron together. They shared a common understanding that every mission was a gamble with death, yet none wavered. "Keep your eyes open, lads. We've got to be sharper than ever," Harrington said during a pre-flight briefing, his tone both commanding and reassuring. The younger pilots, many barely out of their teens, looked to him for guidance and confidence, their nerves steadied by his calm presence. The RAF was a brotherhood forged in the sky, where trust was as vital as ammunition. Integral to the RAF's resilience was its advanced radar technology, a cutting-edge innovation that had transformed the nature of aerial warfare. The chain-home radar network, deployed along the southeastern coast of England, detected incoming German aircraft at astonishing distances, providing precious minutes for fighter command to scramble interceptors. This early warning system was a force multiplier, obviating much of the guesswork that had plagued earlier air defenses. Harrington recalled how the radar operator's vigilant monitoring had saved his squadron from ambushes on more than one occasion. Bandits inbound, bearing 045, 25 miles, came the clipped message from ground control, triggering a precise and coordinated response. The effectiveness of this radar-guided defense was magnified by the seamless integration of ground control and fighter squadrons. Controllers in underground bunkers directed pilots with pinpoint accuracy, vectoring them toward enemy formations while conserving their limited resources. The radio communications were terse but vital. Eagle 2 climbed to 15,000 feet. Intercept at Grid Square Delta 3, crackled the voice from the operations room. This system ensured that the RAF's fewer aircraft were deployed strategically, engaging the Luftwaffe where they could inflict maximum damage. The German pilots, while skilled, lacked a comparable network, often flying blind into well-prepared British defences. Harrington's own squadron was a microcosm of this larger system. Each sortie was an orchestrated ballet of timing, positioning, and aerial tactics. The pilots flew in tight formations, a practice drilled relentlessly to maximize mutual protection and firepower. The Spitfire's agility allowed for swift climbing and diving maneuvers, enabling pilots to exploit enemy weaknesses. Hurricane pilots, though less glamorous, were no less effective, often tasked with engaging the slower German bombers while Spitfires tackled the fighter escorts. The synergy between aircraft types and pilot roles was a critical component of the RAF's defensive strategy. The psychological endurance of the British pilots was as important as their technical skill. Harrington, despite his stoic exterior, grappled with the mental toll exacted by constant combat. The knowledge that each mission might be his last weighed heavily, yet the sense of duty and the collective resolve propelled him forward. "Every time we take off, it's a battle not just with the enemy but with fear," he confided to a fellow pilot during a rare moment of respite. This candid admission underscored the human dimension often overshadowed by tactical analysis. Behind every maneuver and gunshot were men confronting mortality with extraordinary courage. The public support fortified the pilots' resolve. Newsreels and radio broadcasts celebrated their exploits, framing the Battle of Britain as a heroic stand against tyranny. Civilians endured nightly air raid sirens and the destruction wrought by the Luftwaffe's bombing campaigns, yet their spirit remained unbroken. Letters from home, received between missions, served as poignant reminders of what was at stake. Harrington kept a worn photograph of his family tucked beneath his flight map, a talisman against despair. The pilots were not only fighting for survival but for the preservation of a way of life imperiled by the forces arrayed against them. Technological innovation also extended beyond radar. Ground crews worked feverishly to maintain and repair aircraft, often under perilous conditions. A single Spitfire could be patched and returned to service overnight, an achievement that frustrated German planners who expected to degrade British air power through attrition. The RAF's logistical apparatus was a testament to industrial efficiency and wartime improvisation. Harrington understood that his survival was not just a matter of skill but also the dedication of mechanics and strategists operating behind the scenes. The Luftwaffe's persistent assaults tested every facet of the RAF's defenses. Harrington's squadron found themselves intercepting waves of German fighters escorting Heinkel and Dornier bombers, the latter spewing destruction upon British airfields and cities alike. The chaos of aerial combat was punctuated by moments of stark clarity, split-second decisions to break formation, execute tight turns, or press an attack could spell the difference between life and death. Fox 2 banned it down, Harrington reported over the radio after a close engagement, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Each victory was hard-won, each loss deeply felt. Despite the overwhelming odds, the British pilots' determination never faltered. Their ability to adapt, to learn from each engagement and refine tactics, was a hallmark of their resilience. Training emphasized not only individual skill but also the importance of teamwork and communication. Harrington often drilled his squadron on coordinated attacks and mutual support, aware that survival depended on more than just individual prowess. The men trusted each other implicitly, a bond forged in steel and fire. As the battle wore on, the British pilots' combination of superior training, innovative technology, and indomitable spirit began to temper the Luftwaffe's early successes. Harrington knew that the struggle was far from over, but the evidence was clear. The RAF, though outnumbered, was not defeated. Their aircraft sliced through the skies with purpose, their pilots embodying the unyielding defense of a nation under siege. The roar of Merlin engines echoed not only as a call to arms but as a declaration: Britain would fight, and Britain would endure. As the Battle of Britain raged on, an audacious tactical shift began to take shape within the RAF command, a daring maneuver that would come to define the air campaign's turning point, the Big Wing strategy. Squadron leader James Harrington, now deeply entrenched in the daily grind of relentless sorties, listened intently as his superiors debated the merits of assembling large formations of fighters to confront the Luftwaffe en masse. The concept was radical and controversial, challenging long-established doctrines that favored smaller, more flexible groups engaged in swift, targeted strikes. Yet, faced with the overwhelming numbers of enemy fighters and bombers, RAF commanders sought a solution that could overwhelm the Luftwaffe's formations and deliver decisive blows. The big wing tactic involved gathering multiple squadrons, sometimes 5 or more, into a single, massive formation before engaging the enemy. Rather than dispatching small flights scattered across the sky, the RAF envisioned a concentrated force striking with overwhelming firepower and tactical cohesion. This approach required precise coordination, impeccable timing, and the ability to rapidly assemble pilots already airborne or on alert. Harrington, having flown countless missions with his own squadron, understood the immense challenges of such a maneuver. The risks were considerable. Delays in assembly could allow enemy forces to penetrate British defences unchallenged, and the sheer size of the formation demanded flawless communication and discipline. Despite initial skepticism from some commanders, the big wing strategy was championed by key figures such as Air Vice Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory and Squadron Leader Douglas Bader, whose bold leadership inspired the RAF's fighter pilots. Harrington recalled Bader's unmistakable voice over the radio during one of the early attempts. "Gentlemen, this is our chance to hit them hard. Stick tight, watch your six, and let's show them what the big wing can do." The phrase daring maneuver took on new meaning as pilots scrambled to join the growing formation, engines roaring in unison as the wing coalesced like a steel leviathan amidst the clouds. Operational challenges abounded. Coordinating the timing of multiple squadrons, each with their own takeoff schedules and patrol zones, necessitated an unprecedented level of precision. Pilots faced the daunting task of locating their fellow airmen in an ever-shifting sky, often under hostile fire and turbulent weather conditions. Harrington's radio crackled with terse commands and updates. Eagle 3, adjust heading 15 degrees starboard. Formation tightening at 10 o'clock. The big wing's success hinged on these split-second adjustments and the pilot's unwavering discipline. Any lapse could cause fragmentation or collisions, turning the formation from a formidable force into a vulnerable target. The complexity of the big wing was matched only by its tactical brilliance. Once assembled, the massed fighters could unleash a concentrated assault on incoming Luftwaffe formations, disrupting their cohesion and inflicting severe losses. The sheer volume of firepower overwhelmed German escorts, forcing bombers into defensive formations and diminishing their offensive effectiveness. Harrington witnessed firsthand how the big wing's aggressive tactics shifted the momentum of the aerial battle. "We came at them like a thunderbolt," he later recounted, surrounding their fighters, breaking their lines, and forcing the bombers to scatter. It was chaotic but effective. The roar of Merlin engines and the staccato bursts of cannon fire echoed triumphantly as British pilots pressed their advantage. Enemy observers noted the unprecedented scale and ferocity of these engagements. Luftwaffe commanders, initially dismissive of the RAF's tactics, grew wary as the big wing began to exact a heavy toll. German pilots reported encountering massive formations of Spitfires and Hurricanes, their tight formation flying and coordinated attacks unlike anything seen before. "They come in waves," a frustrated Luftwaffe fighter pilot radioed, "too many to handle at once." The psychological impact on the German aircrews was profound. The big wing shattered the illusion of easy dominance and forced a re-evaluation of tactics. It was a testament to British ingenuity and the pilots' unyielding courage. Behind the scenes, the pilots' camaraderie and mutual trust were vital in executing the daring maneuver. Harrington's squadron, accustomed to smaller formations, adapted quickly to the demands of the big wing. The men relied on clear communication and precise positioning, knowing that their survival depended not only on individual skill but on seamless teamwork. During a particularly intense sortie, Harrington's wingman, Flight Lieutenant Andrews, radioed urgently, "Eagle 1, I'm low on fuel but still with you. Keep tight formation, we've got to hold the line." Harrington's response was immediate. "Copy that, Andrews. We fly as one." These moments of shared resolve underscored the human element behind the tactical innovation. The operational tempo accelerated as the big wing became a centerpiece of the RAF's defensive doctrine. Pilots endured exhausting hours in the air, often flying multiple sorties within a single day, their bodies pushed to the limits. The strain of maintaining formation integrity amidst the chaos of battle was immense. Yet, the knowledge that their daring maneuver was turning the tide instilled a fierce determination. Harrington remembered the exhilaration mixed with exhaustion after a successful engagement. We had beaten them back, for now. The air was ours, if only for a moment. This fragile advantage was seized and exploited with relentless tenacity. Critics of the Big Wing argued that its assembly time sometimes allowed German bombers to reach their targets unchallenged, highlighting the delicate balance between concentration of force and timely interception. Nevertheless, the tactic's psychological and material impact was undeniable. The Luftwaffe's losses mounted, and their pilots' confidence eroded in the face of an enemy who refused to yield. The success of the Big Wing demonstrated that innovation and boldness could compensate for numerical inferiority, embodying the very essence of the British fighting spirit. The Big Wing's legacy extended beyond the immediate battle. It became a symbol of coordinated resistance and tactical daring, inspiring not only the pilots who flew within its ranks but also the broader Allied air forces. Harrington, reflecting on those intense days, recognized that the maneuver was more than a combat tactic. It was a declaration of defiance. "We were outnumbered but not outmatched," he mused. The Big Wing showed the world that courage and coordination could change the course of history. As the Luftwaffe reeled from the mounting losses inflicted by these massed formations, the aerial battle evolved into a contest of wills and wits. The British pilots, flying in tight, disciplined formation, executed their daring maneuver with a blend of precision and aggression that confounded their enemies. The roar of Merlin engines filled the skies as the Big Wing tore through enemy lines, a thunderous counterstrike to the German onslaught. In these moments, the tide of the Battle of Britain shifted, and the aerial battlefield became a crucible where innovation, bravery, and determination forged a path to survival. The Luftwaffe, once confident in its ability to dominate the skies over Britain, began to grapple with a series of mounting challenges that would prove as formidable as the RAF pilots themselves. As the days wore on, the operational difficulties faced by German forces became increasingly apparent. Overstretched supply lines, pilot fatigue, and a critical underestimation of British defences compounded to erode the Luftwaffe's early advantages. The initial assumption that sheer numbers and firepower would guarantee victory was swiftly dismantled by the relentless resilience and tactical acumen of the outnumbered British pilots and their innovative command structure. German supply chains struggled to keep pace with the furious tempo of sorties. Airfields scattered across northern France and the Low Countries served as launch points, but the logistics of fueling, arming, and maintaining hundreds of aircraft under constant operational strain proved daunting. Mechanics labored under pressure, often working around the clock to keep the Messerschmitt Bf-109s and twin-engine bombers like the Heinkel He-111 and Dornier Do-17 serviceable. Pilot fatigue became a silent enemy. Many Luftwaffe aviators were freshly transferred from the Blitzkrieg campaigns across Europe and North Africa, but the intensity and scale of the Battle of Britain demanded a relentless endurance that few were prepared for. The psychological toll of facing an enemy who refused to yield and a sky that seemed perpetually hostile weighed heavily on German aircrews. Compounding these issues was a strategic miscalculation by the German High Command, an underestimation of the British radar network and the coordinated ground control system that allowed rapid deployment and concentration of RAF fighters. The chain-home radar stations provided continuous early warning of incoming raids, enabling fighter command to marshal its limited resources with surgical precision. This technological edge frustrated Luftwaffe commanders who had anticipated easier targets and swift victories. The German pilots, despite their skill and experience, often found themselves flying into prepared defenses, their formations disrupted before they could launch effective attacks. A pivotal moment in the Luftwaffe's faltering campaign came with the controversial shift in bombing targets. Initially, German raids focused relentlessly on RAF airfields, radar installations, and aircraft factories, critical infrastructure whose destruction could cripple British air defences. However, after a series of high-profile bombing runs, including the devastating attack on London known as the Blitz, German leadership diverted significant resources to targeting British cities and civilian centres. This strategic pivot, intended to break civilian morale and force political capitulation, inadvertently granted the RAF precious breathing room. The respite allowed British ground crews to repair runways, rebuild radar stations, and replenish aircraft stocks more effectively than the Luftwaffe had anticipated. The Luftwaffe's miscalculations extended beyond strategy to the operational level, where inexperienced pilots were increasingly pressed into service. The losses suffered in prior engagements necessitated rapid training and deployment of fresh airmen, many of whom lacked the experience and tactical skill of their British counterparts. This disparity became starkly evident in dogfights, where seasoned RAF pilots exploited the weaknesses of less battle-hardened German aviators. Squadron leader Harrington noted the shift acutely during a sortie over the Thames estuary. Their formations were less disciplined, their attacks more desperate. It was as if the tide had turned, and they were grasping at straws. This erosion of Luftwaffe effectiveness was both a cause and consequence of the mounting psychological strain within German ranks. The psychological impact of facing an enemy that mastered the skies despite being outnumbered was profound on the German side. Luftwaffe pilots and commanders alike began to question the wisdom of their initial plans and the feasibility of Operation Sea Lion. Reports filtered back from the front lines of increasing casualties and failed missions, sowing seeds of doubt among the high command. "They fight like devils," a frustrated German squadron leader confessed over the radio, "and no matter how many we shoot down, more take their place." The morale of German aircrews, once buoyed by the rapid advances across Europe, now wavered under the weight of relentless British resistance. Within this maelstrom of operational setbacks, the Luftwaffe's strategic decision-making faltered as well. The shifting focus to civilian targets was not only a diversion of resources but a misreading of British morale and resilience. Rather than breaking the spirit of the British people, the bombing raids galvanized them, strengthening resolve and uniting the nation behind the RAF pilots who defended their skies. Harrington, reflecting on the aftermath of one such raid, recalled the defiant cheers of Londoners as firefighters battled blazes and citizens took shelter in underground stations. The Luftwaffe's failure to anticipate the psychological consequences of their bombing campaign was a critical error that undermined their broader objectives. The British pilots, aware of the shifting Luftwaffe tactics, adapted accordingly. Harrington's squadron increased patrols over urban areas, intercepting bombers and escorts attempting to evade detection. The RAF's agility and intelligence capabilities allowed rapid responses to changing German strategies, further compounding the Luftwaffe's difficulties. Ground control officers coordinated these efforts with precision, directing squadrons to emerging threats with minimal delay. The interplay of technology, training, and morale created a feedback loop that increasingly favored the outnumbered defenders. The Luftwaffe's challenges were exacerbated by the limitations of their aircraft. While the Bf-109 was a formidable fighter, it suffered from limited range and endurance, often unable to escort bombers deep into British territory for extended periods. This left German formations vulnerable to concentrated RAF attacks, especially those orchestrated by the newly adopted big-wing formations. Harrington witnessed these vulnerabilities firsthand. We'd catch them as they turned for home, their fuel low, their formations stretched thin. It was a hunter's advantage. The strategic and tactical shortcomings of the Luftwaffe became ever more pronounced as the battle progressed. As German losses mounted and operational pressures intensified, the Luftwaffe was forced into a reactive posture. Their pilots, once aggressors, increasingly sought to preserve their forces amid dwindling reserves. This shift was perceptible to British pilots, whose confidence grew with each successful interception. The enemy's swagger was fading, Harrington observed in his debriefing notes, replaced by caution and desperation. The psychological ascendancy of the RAF was as significant as any physical victory, tipping the balance in a battle where morale was a decisive weapon. The Luftwaffe's mounting difficulties culminated in a gradual scaling back of their offensive raids. German commanders recognized that the goal of air superiority was slipping beyond reach, and the promised invasion of Britain was indefinitely postponed. Despite the Luftwaffe's technological prowess and initial numerical advantage, the combination of operational missteps, underestimation of British capabilities, and the unyielding spirit of the RAF pilots had turned the tide. Harrington and his comrades, flying in tight formations and executing daring maneuvers, had not only survived but had begun to dictate the tempo of the battle. Within the hectic and perilous skies of 1940, the human dimension of this struggle was writ large. The Luftwaffe pilots, caught in a maelstrom of strategic miscalculations and relentless British resistance, faced the harsh reality of an enemy that refused to break. The RAF's unexpected resilience and tactical innovation sowed doubt and fear among the German ranks, transforming what was to be a swift conquest into a protracted and costly engagement. The legacy of these challenges would resonate far beyond the immediate conflict, shaping the course of the war and the very nature of aerial warfare. The skies over Britain, once threatened by the ominous clouds of the Luftwaffe's assault, began to clear not only in the physical sense but in the broader narrative of the Second World War. The courage and tactical innovation displayed by the British pilots during the Battle of Britain marked a decisive turning point, a moment when the tide of conflict shifted irrevocably. Squadron leader James Harrington, like many of his comrades, embodied this spirit of resilience and ingenuity, a testament to the power of determination against overwhelming odds. Their actions not only thwarted German plans for invasion but preserved British independence at a time when the very notion of freedom hung in the balance. The bravery of these pilots was not limited to their skill in the air but extended to their willingness to face near-certain death with unwavering resolve. Harrington often reflected on the tight-knit camaraderie that sustained them through the darkest hours. In the cockpit, every man was acutely aware of the fragility of life, yet they flew with fierce dedication. "We knew the stakes," Harrington recalled, "and we flew not just for ourselves but for the millions who looked to us as the shield against tyranny." This collective spirit forged bonds of friendship and trust that transcended the chaos of battle, creating a brotherhood bound by shared sacrifice and mutual reliance. The tactical innovations, particularly the adoption of the big wing strategy, exemplified the RAF's capacity to adapt and innovate under pressure. The ability to mass large formations of fighters transformed the dynamics of the aerial battle, allowing the outnumbered British pilots to concentrate their firepower and disrupt enemy formations effectively. This bold maneuver, initially met with skepticism, became a symbol of British defiance and tactical daring. Harrington remembered the exhilaration of flying within such a formation, the roar of dozens of Merlin engines blending into a thunderous chorus as they surged toward the enemy. It was a moment where technical prowess met human courage in perfect harmony. The impact of these daring maneuvers extended far beyond the immediate battlefield. The Battle of Britain became a beacon of hope and resilience for Allied forces and civilians alike, inspiring resistance movements and bolstering morale across Europe. The narrative of a small island nation standing firm against the might of the Third Reich resonated deeply, transforming the air battle into a symbol of democratic perseverance. Newsreels, radio broadcasts, and newspapers celebrated the pilots' exploits, weaving their stories into the fabric of national identity. Harrington's own exploits were recounted with admiration, his squadron's actions emblematic of the broader struggle. This legacy was not confined to the annals of history but influenced the very evolution of aerial combat. The lessons learned during the Battle of Britain, coordinated mass formations, integrated radar and ground control, and the importance of pilot training and morale, became foundational principles for air forces around the world. The battle underscored that technology alone was insufficient. Success depended equally on the human element, courage, camaraderie, and the willingness to innovate. Harrington's generation of pilots set a standard that would echo through subsequent conflicts and shape military aviation doctrine for decades. The psychological dimension of the battle was equally profound. The British public's steadfast support for their airmen created a feedback loop of morale that sustained the war effort. Civilians endured nightly air raids, their homes and cities scarred by the Blitz, yet their resolve hardened. Pilots like Harrington drew strength from this shared determination, knowing that their fight was intertwined with that of the nation's survival. Letters from home, small tokens of encouragement, and the collective spirit of defiance against oppression infused their missions with purpose beyond mere survival or victory. Within the squadrons, the bonds forged in the heat of combat created a microcosm of brotherhood. Harrington's squadron, a diverse collection of men from different backgrounds and walks of life, found unity in their shared mission. The stresses of combat, the constant threat of death, and the exhaustion of relentless sorties were met with mutual support and unspoken understanding. Stories of wingmen covering each other's six, of shared laughter and quiet moments between engagements, highlighted the human side of this grand conflict. It was this combination of technical skill, psychological resilience, and interpersonal trust that enabled the RAF to punch above its weight. The broader implications of the Battle of Britain extended into the strategic trajectory of the war. By denying the Luftwaffe air superiority, the RAF effectively postponed and eventually prevented the German invasion of Britain. This preserved the United Kingdom as a critical base for Allied operations, a staging ground for the eventual liberation of Europe. The battle also sent a clear message to Axis powers and neutral nations alike. Britain would not capitulate, and its people and pilots were prepared to fight to the last. Harrington, in later years, reflected on the weight of this responsibility. We were the thin line between invasion and freedom. Every mission was a step toward ensuring that future generations would know liberty. The valor and tactical genius of the British pilots during this period became a cornerstone of Allied propaganda and morale. Their story was one of ingenuity triumphing over adversity, of a nation's resolve crystallized in the steel nerves of its airmen. The Battle of Britain was not merely a military engagement, but a defining moment that galvanized the Allied cause and laid the groundwork for eventual victory. Harrington's name, and those of countless other pilots, became synonymous with heroism and sacrifice, their deeds memorialized in monuments, literature, and film. As the engines of the Spitfires and Hurricanes fell silent at the end of a grueling day, and pilots returned to base battered but unbroken, the significance of their struggle resonated deeply. The Battle of Britain was a testament to the power of courage and innovation in the face of overwhelming odds. It was a chapter in history where human spirit and technological prowess combined to defy conquest and preserve freedom. Squadron leader James Harrington, along with his fellow pilots, stood as living proof that even in the darkest times, daring maneuvers and steadfast hearts could alter the course of history.